Welcome, everyone. This is Johnna Gans from the Sexual Violence Justice Institute at the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Welcome. We're so excited to have you today. So today we are going to be focusing this webinar on the question, what can SARTs do? And really what this is about is focusing our teams on both mission and action. So that's how are we orienting our team. So as a way to get us started today and get you using the chat box, so if you would be so kind as to type in your location, whatever amount of description you are comfortable with on that, and what is the weather currently like? So I'm going to give it just 1 minute while people take the opportunity to use our chat function, say hey, and where they're at, and what the weather is currently like for them. So I'm going to be quiet for just 1 second. Yes, hello, that's from Minnesota. That's hot and humid. Minneapolis, sunny. Ooh, hello from Florida. I'll be down in Florida later this week. I'm so excited. It's going to be so hot. More Minnesota, Nebraska, Nevada, Wisconsin, everyone's saying pretty much warm for the most part. Some rainy. Okay. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. That's pretty exciting. South Dakota and rainy. Excellent. So mostly sunny. Quite a bit of hot and humid. I see there's Kansas, Pennsylvania, raining. Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, wherever you are, wherever you're listening from, welcome. We're so excited to have you. I hope no matter what the weather, your office or wherever you are is a comfortable temperature, because that makes everybody a little bit happy. So you've already practiced using the chat box. Yay. All of your phones are automatically muted. We are, in fact, recording this webinar as put out in the publicity, because that way we can email this out to everybody who registered. There's also a question and answer selection. So if, as I'm talking, you have a question that you want us to see, you can either put it in the chat box, or you can enter it in the question and answer section. So feel free to put that there. There will absolutely be time at the end of the webinar for you to ask any additional questions that you want to cover. So with that, I think that's everything that the logistics end. And I think most folks have come in. The next thing we're going to do is, ooh, super fun poll. This is just another fun thing to add. So if you'll take just a second and you will answer the poll to the best of how it describes your discipline. If you choose other, feel free to use the chat and say what that other means. Oh, I see that I have definite misspelling on prosecution. I just noticed that. Sorry about that. For those listening to the recording without seeing it, you now know that I switched, I added a U on prosecution. Oh no, I just switched the letters. That's okay. Take a minute, answer the poll, even with its misspellings. What a great and humbling moment to remind us that none of us are ever above mistakes, are we? All right. So it looks like 84% of people have voted. I'll just give it 1 more second to see any other voting coming in. And I see we got coalition staff for one of the others. Give it just 1 more second. Okay, I'm going to close our poll. We're doing it. That's awesome. So it looks like about 72% of you are from advocacy, 1% is from law enforcement, and then 4, so 22%, are from another type of discipline. Thanks for participating. All right, and we're closing the poll. Share the results. If you wish to see it, there it is for you. All right, so I'm going to close that. All right, so let's get rolling on our content. So just real quick, a little bit about me. I'm Joanna Gans, as I said. I'm the Rural Projects Coordinator at the Sexual Violence Justice Institute at the Minnesota Coalition Against Sexual Assault. I am responsible for most of the programming that takes place in our Rural Technical Assistance Grant. So we provide training, technical assistance, etc. I have a feeling that most of you are familiar with the Sexual Violence Justice Institute, but just a real quick rundown is that we are a training and technical assistance provider for any of folks who are working in multidisciplinary teams working to address sexual violence in their communities. That's our quick nutshell. And of course, I want to give just an extraordinarily big shout out to the Office of Violence Against Women, who fund our Technical Assistance and Training Cooperative Grant. So without them, this work could not happen in the way that it does. So big thank you. And of course, as always, what we present here today is not necessarily the views of the Department of Justice and the Office of Violence Against Women. So that's me in a nutshell. As we move forward today, I gave you in the publicity 3 primary objectives. So we were going to work through how to write missions. We were going to use some questions and some guidelines on how to look at a scope of work and vision. And then we're going to figure out opportunities for SART work in your community and or across your state, since we have coalition staff here today. So with that, here is your first opportunity to add to our webinar content. What is the purpose of working on a sexual assault response team? So I'm going to go ahead and give it just 1 second of silence to let you folks chat in. What do you see as the purpose for a team? Improved response to sexual assault survivors. Love it. Yep. How about other folks? Being able to help the victims. Yes, absolutely. Support for victims, timely care, management to incidents, and education for the community. Awesome. Any other purposes? I'll give it just 1 more second here. That's inaccurate. It's probably going to be more than a second. Oh, wow. Coordinating agencies that impact, work with victim survivors to create the best response, raising community awareness and participation, coordinate and collaborate to provide practices and services, multidisciplinary participation. These are all really great examples of what is the purpose of teams. So I'm certain you're all going to keep chatting in. Absolutely. Collaborate to provide a victim-centered and offender-focused response. Yeah, woo! Okay, so these are absolutely all reasons. And things in the purpose of the team. When I talk about teams, and when I think about what is the purpose of a team, I think about them as strategies. And so when we talk about a strategy, it's a plan of action designed to achieve a particular goal. That's our basic dictionary definition. When I think about what is the true purpose of a team, it is part of a plan of action to help impact and end sexual violence within our communities. And I think what's really important about strategies is that typically to achieve really big goals, you need to have numerous strategies. And so when I talk about teams, I think about teams as just one of many strategies that are working to impact the sexual violence response for our communities. There are lots of other strategies out there. You can absolutely chat in some strategies that you think of, but I think of things like prevention campaigns. So that's another one of the strategies that we use to end sexual violence in our communities. There are plenty of other strategies. My mind is blanking, of course, in the moment that I need another strategy. So prevention, policy work. Law and policy work is always a great strategy to try to end sexual violence within our community and impact victim survivors' experiences of our response. The important thing with all of these is not one single strategy is going to achieve the outcome that we're looking for. And so when you're thinking about your team, and especially when we start thinking about it as a road trip, you need to think about it as one really powerful strategy to move forward and change our response. So with that framing of like, this is one strategy, we're now going to shift into a really awesome road trip. Dun, dun, dun. Road trip time. So I'm going to have you chat in once more. This is going to be a super participative webinar if you can't tell already. What do you absolutely need to have in order to take a road trip? So go ahead and chat in. I'm going to repeat the question again. What do you absolutely have to have in order to take a road trip? Already, thank you. Direction. You absolutely need a direction. Got to figure out where you're going. Some type of vehicle. Yep, what's a road trip without some sort of transportation? A plan? Yes, absolutely. You generally kind of want to know where you're going and how you're going to go about getting there. You need fuel. Love it. Thank you, Shirley. You need rest. Absolutely, especially set a day's rest room, because many times on a road trip, somebody always has to stop somewhere. I'm going to wait for just one more minute. You need time. Absolutely. You need the appropriate amount of time to go on your road trip. If it's a 22-hour drive, you can't possibly expect to do that in 14 hours. So some of it's about just the time to go do that thing. I'm going to give it just one more second. If anyone else has something they want to add as absolutely necessary on a road trip. All right. I think that's a really great list. For the purpose of this webinar, I came up with 4 things that most of you have, that you've already mostly covered. 4 sort of pieces that are absolutely required to take a road trip, and especially in the context of our SARTs. So I came up with, you need a vehicle, you need drivers and navigators, you need a route to get where you're going, and finally, you actually need a destination of where you're trying to get to in your road trip. So we're going to use this metaphor of our road trip together to frame up kind of our conversation about what it is that SARTs can do. So let us begin on our fantastic road trip. I hope somebody brought good music and some good snacks, because I didn't bring either. I just am going to drive for us. So first and foremost, you need a vehicle. So this is what carries you on your path to wherever it is that you want to go with your SART. What's really important about understanding the frame of the vehicle is that this is really all about your team format. And it's how you're structuring the team to carry you. So that can include structuring things like how you are handling your meetings. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that's just to get you going. So when I talk about the vehicle, I want to make sure that everybody is on the exact same page that I am on. So I'm going to very briefly go over what is a sexual assault response team. And I know for many of you this might seem kind of basic, but we always have listeners who are brand new to their jobs, and this is useful. So if you already know, you can just, think about your life choices for a little bit. So a sexual assault response team is an acronym for a SART is an acronym for a sexual assault response team. What's really important is to know that there are so many different names and acronyms and labels for these kinds of teams. And when I say these kinds of teams, we're really talking about teams comprised of multidisciplinary representatives. And of course, that's an absolutely essential component, is that there is a multidisciplinary representative coming from all over in your community. It is the multidisciplinary nature of a SART that gives it its true strength. And having been a SART leader, I know sometimes the multidisciplinary nature can sometimes feel like a really big frustration, but really and truly, our best work comes when we are collaborating through difference and through diversity of thought and process. So, SARTs have a multidisciplinary representative. SARTs are fundamentally focused on collaboration with one another and systems change. And when I talk about collaboration, I'm not saying, you just talk every once in a while when you absolutely have to, but rather you're really pitching in to do good work together. And when we talk about systems change, we're talking about creating and building a legacy that goes and spans both within systems and across systems. And that's really important because, especially in this current cultural moment of the Me Too era, we're really seeing the ways in which our systems have not always been able to respond appropriately to the sheer volume of sexual violence that occurs in our world. And so this is our moment, and this is our opportunity to look at systems and say, how can we improve this to ensure that we don't have another Me Too era? SARTs, no matter what their name, they're all fundamentally devoted to changing sexual violence response in the community. And thankfully, that's a pretty easy, self-explanatory point. So, if you're not devoted to changing a sexual violence response in the community and you're a SART, I would love to talk with you more about what it is you actually do. With any SART, using a continuous improvement process is absolutely essential to achieving your goals. And we'll talk a little bit more about what a continuous improvement process might look like. And then finally, and this is like the absolute essential part of your vehicle to get you to and from, we are working to improve outcomes for all victim survivors. I'm going to stress all. We're going to talk about the word all more later, but I really truly mean all victim survivors. That includes folks from marginalized communities. That includes folks who felt like they could never report to anyone. That includes all victim survivors. And this is really the heart of our work. And when I talk about improving outcomes for victim survivors, I often get a little bit of pushback, and people talk about, well, that's really touchy-feely. And I don't think that's actually accurate. I mean, it can be, certainly. But really, when we're thinking about improving outcomes for victim survivors, we're thinking about improving outcomes for criminal justice response, because that's the heart of most SARTs. They're working in the criminal justice response, in the criminal justice system. And so when we look at how are we supporting and improving these outcomes, we're really finding out how are we ensuring long-term engagement, how are we ensuring appropriate service delivery, and how are we looking at offender accountability. So that's like the heart. So if ever you are looking for a vehicle to get to an end to sexual violence and impacting the response in your community, a SART's probably a real good strategy to get there. So there are two primary types of SARTs. And again, I'm just going to go over these very briefly to make sure that everybody's on the same page with us. So there's the acute response SART. And these are the folks who get together when there is a single active case, as in the assault just recently occurred, a person is seeking services. This is when your SART gets together. And that means most changes occur within individual responders. So it's one medical provider who is working with one law enforcement officer who's working with one advocate, and amongst them, they talk about what sort of changes need to happen in their response. And that ultimately means that you have to have a commitment on that really individual level. So the person who's responding on that acute response SART, the commitment comes from them. Which means our processes depend on each and every responder who is participating. So when the process occurs, any changes that happen, all of that stays with that one person unless they communicate it forward to others. And that means it results in a smaller scale but highly targeted set of changes. This is a really great opportunity for folks who are experiencing, they don't have many sexual violence instances in their community that are being reported and people seeking services. This can be really useful there. It can be really useful for communities that are just starting to get SART work underneath, like get their feet under them with it. The acute response SART is absolutely a great solution for some communities. On the flip side, a great solution for some other communities are the systems change SARTs. And those are the focus, where they focus on multiple cases and all of the processes attached with those cases. So rather than focusing on that one single active case, they're really looking at anywhere from cold cases to closed cases to active cases. It could be a pretty broad range. and really looking at how did responders as a pattern respond in those processes. This means any changes that need to happen are going to be targeted toward agencies and the actual system processes. So it's not so much about individual providers and individual service responders. It's really looking at the agency. That means you're going to have agency-wide commitment. So you have to have leadership on board. You have to have first-line responders on board. You have to have that agency-wide commitment. And ultimately, this is going to work to deeply embed any processes, because if an agency takes on policy change or retraining all their individuals on new practices, that's usually a pretty hefty time finance commitment, and so people are going to ultimately embed that. And that means you're resulting in long-term, widespread change that takes a long time to get to. And so acute and systems change, SARTs, they both have excellent reasons of why they might be a good fit for your community. They definitely both have their drawbacks. And it's really a matter of looking at and talking to your fellow service providers about what your community can reasonably sustain. So if ever you have questions on that, or you're like, wow, I would just love to pick your brain, Joanna, about acute versus systems change SART, absolutely get a hold of us here at SVJI. Any one of us could talk to you about this, and we all have lots of information. So back to our vehicle for our road trip. Now that you have selected, maybe your type of vehicle, you've looked at some of the options that you want, we're heading out we're getting ready to head on the road. When we're talking about the role of the team, this is going to be really important when you're thinking about, well, how are we going to transport ourselves on our path to reducing sexual violence in our communities and impacting the victim survivor response? And really, when we're thinking about the role of the team, we're thinking about changes to service and response. So it's all about that design. So when we're talking about getting to that mission and action, this is the heart of our work. And so this is what we're truly capable, whether it's an acute response SART or a systems change SART or any sort of blend between those two. What we're capable of actually making changes to is the types of services we provide and how our response has been designed amongst service providers, but also within our own agencies. And fundamentally, that means that that's where we need to focus our efforts, okay? And we're doing that in order to really, truly seek justice for all victim survivors. There's a lot of really great information about how we better serve communities that are traditionally underrepresented or marginalized from our services, folks who feel like for whatever reason they can't access traditional criminal justice or advocacy services. And that really is what we're doing here. And that is the heart of our work. And so that's what truly, I would describe it, if I'm continuing with my metaphor, I would describe this as the engine of our vehicle. This is what makes it happen. So with that and our selecting as a vehicle, the other things that I really want you to think about when you're choosing what type of vehicle that will best meet the need for your community, you need to think about how your team is going to function. So this is like looking at a car lot and saying, well, what options do I want on my car? Think about your leadership structure. Do you want to have a single facilitator who runs every single meeting? Do you want to look at a co-facilitation structure where you have maybe 2 co-facilitators who are working, maybe even 3? There was one team that I worked with that had a primary facilitator, but then the person who was responsible for being like, it would be a good equivalent is like a political whip of getting people back on track and back going to the meetings, right? So they worked as a team because one worked really well as a facilitator and the other one worked better as sort of the harder hand to get folks to work well. You might also want to think about the actual setup of the team. So for some teams, they choose operating as a full and complete team that meets every single month, every single quarter, every single week, whatever it might be. you might look at that and say, I don't think that that is the vehicle that will meet the need of our community. We should look at a subcommittee setup or maybe an advisory board process for getting extra information or for being able to discuss issues in depth. Additionally, when you're thinking about the vehicle that you want to take you toward changing your service and response design and ultimately improving outcomes for victim survivors, you're going to want to think about things like what process do we set up for selecting and onboarding new members to our SART? Turnover is absolutely inevitable. Just like when your car reaches a certain number of miles, you have to eventually get a new car. Same with our team members. For whatever reason, people got a new job, they moved, whatever. We have to think about the structures and making sure we have all the options and the design that truly meets the needs of our communities. So let's talk about drivers and navigators. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to chat in your thoughts. So this is the part of the road trip where it's really about the who. And so I want to give you the opportunity. What are good qualities about a driver? So when you're looking for someone to lead you on your road trip, like let's say you're looking at a friend and you're saying, hey, let's go on a road trip. What's a good driver? And how do you know they're a good driver? So go ahead and chat your thoughts. I'm going to drop silent for just a second to let people type in. All right, so we have a couple people throwing some thoughts out there. You want a safe and responsible driver. You want a responsible and attentive driver, reliable. You might want an experienced driver. That's fair. They use their turn signals. Oh my gosh. This is probably one of my greatest pet peeves in life, so I'm just going to detour from our webinar for just 1 second and talk about the importance of using your turn signals. Nothing grinds my gears more when I'm in traffic and people are not using their turn signals, because, as Shirley states, teens need to know the direction the group is going. Use your turn signals. And then we have another one, responsible and aware. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So the second question that I really want to ask people is, what are the qualities of good navigators? So oftentimes we have a driver, and then we have someone helping navigate, whether it is our phone giving us directions or a person. What are some of the qualities of good navigators when you're thinking about it? So go ahead, take a minute, and type in your thoughts. Good navigators, what are the qualities? Ooh, so I see patience, detail-oriented. I love it. They give enough notice of a change in the direction. Absolutely effective, calm, and appropriate communicators. They fundamentally can provide information to the driver. They have a good sense of direction, a little bit visionary. Absolutely, I love it. These are all really great qualities to your navigator. I'll just give it 1 more second. See if anyone else has something to drop in the question of what makes a good navigator. Good communicator, absolutely. I love it. Yeah, with all of that. So when we're talking about, in the context of our team, our drivers and our navigators, and then the extra sneaky position of the passenger, because usually our teams are pretty large, and I am assuming a 4-person sedan might not work for your transportation. We usually have drivers, we have navigators, and then we have passengers on our SART journeys and road trips. So let's talk a little bit more about our drivers and navigators. So I get the question a lot in my technical assistance of who should be on my SART. So when we're thinking about this first set of folks I'm going to talk about are typically our driver comes from this, and our navigators come from these groups. So let's talk about it. So we look at advocacy, and there are some pretty vast differences between systems-based advocacy and community-based advocacy that in and of itself could be its own webinar. And if you ever want to talk about the differences and the issues that come with the differences between them, super happy to talk about it. In a nutshell, the only people who can truly provide confidential services that are protected by privilege statutes and legislation are folks who are in community-based advocacy as a rule. So we really want to think about advocacy on our team. And typically, advocates are usually coordinators for the team, so that makes them the driver. We have medical providers, and that can be anyone who, routinely responds to sexual violence, all the way up to sane, certified, and trained nurses. So we have a pretty wide variety of medical providers. Because we know for a lot of rural communities, they struggle to maintain sane programs, not because they don't have dedicated and amazing people, but because there's other issues, like there's simply not enough reports of sexual violence to medical establishments where they can get the required number of hours to keep their certification. There's also distance travel, things like that. So that's why we talk about medical care providers. We also see law enforcement, prosecutors or district attorneys' offices, and corrections or probation. So these are our kind of core group of folks when we're thinking about, back to the service and response design, these are the folks who can truly make changes to our service and response design. And it is from this group that we get our drivers, as we've already talked about, and we're looking for folks who are, responsible and safe and reliable. With our driver, we're really looking for people who are attentive and who can use a turn signal. And from this group, when we think about anyone who is not the driver, but rather these folks serve as our navigators, they are best when they are effective and calm communicators, that they provide good information to the driver, that they have a good sense of direction and they're visionary or good vision, right? These are the folks that help our driver get to and from. And so whenever I talk with coordinators or SART leaders of any kind, and they talk about, well, I just do all the work, that's a really great opportunity to talk about how can you get the other folks who are responsible for changing service and response, how can you get them to be good navigators with you? How can you get them to really communicate the direction that we should all be going? And how do you get them talking about that? And again, if ever you want, please get a hold of anyone here at SVJI. We'd be all happy to talk about that kind of stuff. So then I talked a little bit about our passengers. So folks on our passenger list, and these are not just passengers who sit quietly and do nothing. No, these are very active and informed passengers. These are the kinds of folks that will carry the conversation and will give new information. They'll point out interesting landmarks. They will point out, oh wow, I see a detour coming and the navigator is currently not noticing that. So these are very active and informed passengers. So we have our related systems. So colleges and university campuses, especially under Title IX, often are participating on SARTs. You might have adult protection of some form on your team. You can have any other variety of related systems that are also operating that can provide you really good information and help give you and the navigators a really good sense of what's happening on the ground. You'll also see community and culturally specific groups. And so when we think about a community-specific group, I want you to think very much about what is unique about my community. So what is a particularly strong or important group within my community? So one example is working with some communities, faith is a really important part of the community. One of the groups that I talked with, they had one, and it was a church, they had one church for the entire area, and most folks attended that church. So that faith leader heard a lot of disclosures of sexual violence, but didn't ever really know how to get people connected to service. So that's a community-specific group that would be really important to have as one of your active and informed passengers on your road trip. Additionally, you might look at culturally specific groups. So I guarantee you, no matter where you are, no matter what work you're doing, you have culturally specific groups who live in your community and service area, okay? Even if it's only 1% of your total demographic population, you have folks who need services, and most of the time with culturally specific groups, they've had a pretty hard time connecting with services and with systems. So you're going to really want to look at what are the culturally specific groups that we want to work with, and that should be a part of our SART because they're serving folks that we might not necessarily always see. So to speak a little more specifically, you're going to look at any folks who are serving LGBTQ folks, so lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer folks. You're going to want to look at any kind of organization that works with folks where English is not their first language, and spoken English in particular. You might want to look at folks for deaf and hard of hearing communities. You might want to look at those providing services to elderly populations. You might want to look at folks who are providing services to Latinx populations, right? The list kind of goes on and on. But it's really important that you look for those passengers and invite them on your road trip because they will give you information that you could otherwise never get. And it helps ultimately improve outcomes for all victim survivors. Remember how I talked about that all? This is the moment of the all. And so then finally, what we're really talking about are primary points of sexual violence disclosure and any primary points that are entry into help seeking. So you can absolutely have a road trip that's just too big, right? You can have too many people, they don't fit in the car. So you want to be careful about how many people you're inviting on your road trip. But you do want to be sure that they are good, informed, they can help you navigate, they will communicate, they will give you that sense of direction. So, as we talked about, and many of you just got on like right away, the communication is absolutely essential on our road trip, and especially when we're thinking about how do we really focus our SARTs on mission and action. Communication is the primary way. I have a very good friend of mine, and we always joke and call it the big C, and the big C is communication. So, on the left side of the screen, you see the folks who are actually attending your SART meetings. And in every case, we have a little orange person. They fit all the way across. Yay! So the first part of the communication loop starts with the agency to the representative. Okay? So your representative has to be knowledgeable on what the agency wants, what its policies are, what their fellow colleagues are doing as practices, and that work. Is there a question? Oh, that's not good. I'm going to pause for just 1 second. Okay, never mind. We got it. I am heard once more. Okay, so I'll just keep going. Please let us know if you have any other communication-related issues. What an apt moment. Okay, so from our agency to our representative is our first part of the communication loop. So our representatives have to be well informed of what's happening with our agency. The next step is for that representative to bring the information from the agency to the SART meeting. And this is really critical. This is something that I saw when I was leading a SART, is when folks would speak, they would often talk about, well, what I believe, what I think, what I want to see happen. And eventually over time I started asking them, is that the policy or stance of your agency? And that's when folks took a moment and realized that they were really there as a representative of their agency. They weren't speaking as themselves. So that's our first part of our loop. So once we're at the SART meeting, the next part of the loop is that your representative has to be one of those informed, engaged navigators and passengers, and they have to take that information from the SART, hold on to it, and then finally bring it back to the agency. So this communication loop works constantly. So this figure 8 is always happening. And that's really part of our roles, responsibilities, and communication. It is absolutely the role and the responsibility of the agency to remain in communication with their representative about what they want to see being presented at a SART. It is absolutely the role and responsibility of the SART to discuss that, come up with solutions and suggestions, and for the representative to bring that back to the agency to discuss, make decisions on. Anytime we see a breakdown, whether from agency to individual, individual to SART, or back, that's when we start to see a lot of problems in our drivers and our navigators and our passengers. So if you're having any struggles with that, by all means, let us know. We can help. Just that message a million times. So let's say that we're now on our road trip. We've selected our vehicle. We know exactly what type of SART we're doing and how we're going to do it. We've got our navigators. We've got our drivers. We've got our passengers on board. How do we all get on board to really know where we're going? Oh my gosh, great question. Let's talk about the importance of a mission statement. So mission statements are how we get everybody on the same page of how we're going to go about this. So the most important thing about a mission statement is that it functions just like a compass. The most important things about a compass is that it is short, clear, and memorable. When we think about a compass, it really is just a device that tells us whether we're going north, east, south, or west. Your mission should serve a very similar function. It should be short, clear, and memorable enough that if I were to come to your SART meeting tomorrow, let's just say we're all having SART meetings tomorrow, if I were to come tomorrow and say, you, random navigator on this road trip of a SART, tell me what is your mission? And they should be able to get darn close to what it is. If folks don't have a short, clear, or memorable mission statement, then they're not really able to understand how plans are going to align. That's when we see folks who are going in different directions really come to agree. Your mission statement defines your team's purpose, and if your team wants to be able to take strong action, they have to have a strong mission statement. And sometimes with some teams, they don't have a mission statement written down, but everybody knows what it is, and they all know what they're doing, and that's awesome. I, of course, am a person who is a big fan of documentation and highly recommend that you have it written down. For those of you who are like, wow, I don't even know where to start with this mission statement business, it answers just 3 questions. Who are you? What do you do? Who benefits as a result of your work? So when we are able to come up with a mission statement that really answers all 3 of these in a very succinct way, every single time we start to look at our travel plans, every time we start to think about where that we want to go in this SART and what is our destination, our mission is what's going to hold us accountable and help us come to an agreement on where we're going. So I'm going to give you just give you some examples of what a mission statement might look like when it just answers these 3 questions. So the SVJI County SART, so who you are, addresses sexual violence response, strengths, and gaps, what you do in order to better serve victim survivors, who benefits as a result of your work. So another example, and this one's a little bit longer, and these are actual examples from technical assistance and field work. So these are actual mission statements that are currently functioning out in the SART landscape. So the next one is, the SVJI County SART exists to create and implement a victim-centered, multi-agency response to meet the needs of individuals who experience sexual violence. This one is a little bit longer. There are a couple of ways you could cut it down if you wish, but this is the one that serves that team, and this is what they selected as best for their individual and county road trip. So I also have a fun worksheet, because everybody loves fun worksheets. I have a fun worksheet that has these questions laid out, and you can absolutely do it with your team. Please just get a hold of me and or any member of SVJI, and we can send that your way. All right, so continuing on with our navigators and our drivers and passengers, how do we actually start choosing our destination? And this is where I want to talk a little bit about vision and scope of work. So when we think about our vision, it's much like the image that I have up on the screen of the glasses focusing in on just a small portion of the cityscape in front of them. Our vision really helps us focus in on what we are able to see clearly and what we want to be doing. And so with our vision, we're going to be answering questions like, how will the response be different because of the team's work? And of course, I've shortened it on your screen. But how will the response be different because of the team's work? And in particular, I just was doing a site visit for a newly forming team. And when I asked them this question, they struggled with it a little bit. They were trying to kind of figure it out. And so I reframed the question to say, when I come back to visit your team in 5 years, and I say, hey team, what did you do with your last 5 years? What do you want to answer me with? And so that really helped them frame their vision together. And that's when I saw them in all of the driver, navigator, and passenger glory. That's when I saw them start to really align and talk about where they wanted to be going. And so another way to think about it is to say, what will all, and back to that all, right? I'm just going to keep driving that point home. What will all victim survivors be able to say in your community because of your work as a team? Will every victim survivor be able to say, I was believed? They took me seriously? Will all victim survivors be able to say, I received appropriate services that were designed to meet my need rather than to meet the needs of others? Right? What is it that people are going to say? This helps you select your destination as a group. It has to be community specific. Real important on that one. Make sure that whatever vision you're choosing, wherever it is you want to go as a team on your individual and county road trips or community road trips, that it's specific to you. So if I come to you and say, hey, what's your vision? And I can pick up that vision and drop it off somewhere else in the country where I provide technical assistance, and they're like, this is exactly the same vision that we have. I'm going to ask you to think, how can you define it for your community? So for example, let's say you have 3 colleges and universities in the community and in the service area that you provide services to. You might want to develop a vision that includes acknowledging, right, colleges and universities. Or let's say you have 10% of your population is primarily Spanish-speaking folks. You're going to want to develop your vision that really meets the need of the folks who are speaking primarily Spanish in your community. Additionally, when you're thinking about your vision, you want to prioritize and make sure to prioritize your issues, the needs, and goals. When I say issues, I don't mean problems. I mean the hot topic things that are coming up for people, right? So maybe medical forensic compliance is an extraordinarily hot topic for you right now, and that it's something that you can't move forward. No other part can move forward until you address that. That's going to be a prioritized issue. Or back to what I was just talking about with the Spanish-speaking population, right? You might need to see that as a prioritized need. Folks are not receiving any services at all because there is no Spanish-speaking advocates, there's no Spanish-speaking literature for law enforcement, right? Whatever that is. And then finally, when you're thinking about your destination and building it with your drivers and navigators and passengers, you want to make sure it's measurable in some way. And that's the beautiful thing about a vision. So a vision can absolutely change. It's about a current destination. And when you make it measurable, when you look at your prioritized issues, needs, and goals, when you make it community specific, you can build your travel plans around that vision. And once you've established responses that meet those needs, you get to select a new vision. You get to articulate how is it, we've now made the response different because of our team's work. What else are we going to do? How else are we going to make our community response be different because of our work? Okay? So, and that's where we start getting and looking at that action portion and moving into the action. It's important to understand that visions can and should adapt based on travel conditions. Real talk. Travel conditions are sometimes unpredictable in the world of the SART landscape. So I want to make sure that I drive home the point that your vision, your plans can adapt to whatever the circumstances are, and feel free to be able to do that. Okay, so now we've got all of our drivers, navigators, we've selected a vehicle, all that's done. Now let's talk about our route. So our route is really going to be focused in on the steps and paths we take to get to wherever our vision we agree that we want to go. Okay, so the route is going to assume that you've already established your mission, everybody's on board, you all know kind of where you want to get going. Your route's going to also include things like pit stops, detours, and sightseeing. And I want to make that part really clear, because oftentimes when I talk to teams and team coordinators, they talk about, well, we're not where we should be. And I absolutely hear that, but life happens, right? When we think about pit stops, or when we think about detours, you might have a coordinator that turns over 3 times in 5 years. That's a real example, by the by, right? Or you might have a sightseeing tour of one of your agencies gets a massive grant that all members of the SART need to be helping on, right? You're going to have some changes to your route. It's okay to be adaptable and flex with that. So let's talk about how we start establishing our route in a meaningful way, right? Because most folks don't go on a road trip and just say, we'll get there however we get there. You usually, like MapQuest, Google Maps, Apple Maps, all the brands, I'm not endorsing a single one of them, just to be very clear, right? But you choose some sort of program to help you get to where you want to go, or you just straight up use a paper map. I do miss paper maps. So planning your route is about finding opportunities for continuous improvement. And SVJI has established a 3 phases of systems change cycle that is a continuous improvement cycle. I'm just going to put it out there now. I don't care what continuous improvement approach you use. Please just continue to find places to increase and improve the outcomes for victim survivors. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly talk about this one as a way to help you plan your route in a meaningful way. So our first step is assess status quo. So it's really important that you learn about the current responses and the experiences of victim survivors, as well as service providers in your community. There are a million ways to do this. What is most important is that you get information outside of your SART members. I can't tell you the number of SARTs that I've worked with that are like, oh, well, we polled our members and this is what our team members, this is what we decided we're going to do. That might be a place to start. However, there's so much information out there. There's so many victim survivors that you need to hear from. There's so many other service members or service providers that you need to hear from. There's just so much information. Go find it, because that helps you get a complete picture about current responses and experiences on the ground. After you've assessed your status quo, you're going to want to make change. So I like to shorten the assess status quo portion to ask, ASQ. It's not catching on as fast as I would like it to, but this is your opportunity to help me make it a thing. So use the ask info to target your improvements. So when I was talking about your vision and like selecting the prioritized needs, assessing your status quo is a great way to find out what are the most pressing needs in our community, and then make change based on that information. And then finally, we have to, and I'm saying the word have to real strongly here, we have to check the effectiveness and outcome of the changes we have made. That's part of continuous learning processes. We look back and say, okay, we made this shift. Is it doing what we needed it to do? And if not, why not? And how can we get there? In order to plan a route, we really have to be able to say, is this our best opportunity? And then as we're driving along the path, we have to be able to say, is this still what's right? Can we do something different? So, using our continuous improvement model, I want to talk about next our areas of action. So I'm going to pause because I've been talking a lot, and I want to ask you, when you think about the work of your SART, and you're thinking about your very own SART road trip, what are areas of action, right? Where are places that you can make improvements together as a team? So I'm going to pause for just 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and drop quiet. I'm going to let people answer the question, where are areas of action where you can make changes as a team? All right, first couple answers are coming in on where are areas of action you can take to make change. So we have assessing outcomes and conflict resolution, absolutely. Trust building in your team and community, love it, absolutely. Those are especially important components within our work, is building that trust across team members, across the agency, and with community. When we hear from victim survivors, we often hear about how they don't trust service providers and they don't feel like that they can access that service. So that's really important. I'm just going to give it 1 more minute to see if anyone else has ideas on where are the areas of action that you can take in a SART to make change. Oh, another one just came in. Helping team members support marginalized populations. Empowering victim survivors, yes. Trust the process, having patience, being open to change. Yes, I love it, absolutely. I love these. Okay, you can keep typing in and keep chatting in. We'll absolutely see your responses. I'm going to talk a little bit about concrete areas of action that I see in our work. First and foremost, one of the biggest places where we can truly build a SART that takes action around is, oh, that was not as dramatic as I wanted it to be, individual practices. So when I talk about individual practices, I'm actually talking about the steps that each and every single service provider who responds to sexual violence takes. So when we're thinking about what is it that our SART can do once we've aligned our missions and visions, and now we're going to start taking that action, we can focus in on individual practice. So something as simple as, what are the word choices people use when they're talking to victim survivors, right? So one of the big word choice things that I see going on in the national landscape right now is the concept of alleged versus reported. And the impact it has on a victim survivor, rather than saying the alleged victim, or they allegedly were assaulted, saying the reported victim, the reported event, the reported sexual assault. Those kinds of word choices in individual practice can make an enormous difference. Another example of individual practice that we can look at as a site for change to improve victim survivor outcomes is how we introduce ourselves. So, for example, I have a PhD, and when I introduce myself as, hello, I'm Dr. Gans, that is a real big distance, especially when I was doing direct service. I never allowed anybody to introduce me as Dr. Gans to any victim survivor, because they don't feel like they're talking to a person, they're talking to a title. And so it's really important in thinking about our individual practices, what kind of difference it could make in setting up a practice of putting your name first, saying, hi, my name is Joanna. I'm here from the SVJI Advocacy Center. I'm here to talk to you about what's happened, right? Or even thinking for law enforcement, right? Instead of saying, hi, I'm Sergeant Gans, and I'm not a Sergeant Gans, just for the record, but saying, hi, I'm Sergeant Gans. I'm here to talk to you. It's very different than saying, hi, I'm Joanna. I'm a sergeant from the SVJI County Police or Sheriff's Office. I'm here to talk to you. So when we're thinking about our areas of action, I would strongly encourage your SART to think about what are the individual practices of responders that we can look at, standardize, to improve our outcomes. And at any point as I'm talking about these area of actions, if you come up with ideas, feel free to chat them in. And make sure that you mark on the to section to all panelists and participants. That way other people can see your great ideas, because I'm certain I'm not the only one with great ideas on this webinar. Like 100% certain of that. So if you think of individual practices, you send them in. Or, as we're getting to next on our mission in action, agency policies. Woo! Right? When we think about what can our SART do and where can we have an impact on our service and response design, we absolutely can impact our agency policies. So things like including advocacy as soon as there is a report of sexual violence, right? Because there's actually really cool research out there that demonstrates the impact that advocacy has on criminal justice case outcomes. So if ever you want that, by all means get a hold of me. I hoard research like it's nobody's business. You can look at agency policies, for example, like practices around case declination. So in the event that a prosecutor, district attorney, Commonwealth attorney, you know, all the different types of attorneys for our counties and regions, if they have to decline a case, what are the agency policies on how that's handled? Do they have to meet with the victim survivor and explain the declination? Do they have a victim witness advocate there able to explain that for them, right? Looking at what is your, not the individual practice of each and every single attorney working in the office, what is the policy that's been written about how we thoughtfully handle case declinations? Or you might think about law enforcement and report writing, for example. That's a great area to think about. What are our policies? How do people use the language of non-consent, right? And using that. There's actually a really great set of EVALI webinars and information on using the language of non-consent in report writing. So if ever you want that, by all means, go look at EVALI. They've got that, and it's really good information. So our next area of action where our SART can have a true impact along our road is our system processes. And when I say system processes, what I'm really talking about is our paradigms, right? The paradigms that we operate, that we take for granted, and the ways that the system has just worked. So for example, one of the system processes that a SART can really impact is whether or not there are suspect exams being conducted. So it is a normal paradigm that we always have a victim survivor get an exam, a medical forensic exam, if they are able and willing, right? That's just like a thing that we recommend. Not all communities recommend getting suspect exams. So we want to look at shifting those systems processes, and we really want to look at shifting those paradigms. Another really big paradigm shift that's happening in our systems right now, so not just our agencies, but all of the systems that are connected, is trauma-informed interviewing, right? There are plenty of law enforcement agencies writing agency policy on this. There are governing bodies and coordinated efforts on behalf of law enforcement in the entire region or state. We're trying to implement trauma-informed interviewing as the standard and as the paradigm by which we do our work. And then, so system processes, those are my examples for those. And again, throw out more if you have them. Another area that we have the ability to truly impact, to take action, is collaboration. So this is truly how are our agencies working together in the event of sexual violence response. And of course, it has lasting implications for more than just response, but of course the SART, that's really what we're focusing on. So things like who's responsible for storing kits, right? Sexual assault, medical forensic exam kits. Many states don't have any sort of legislation or, guidance around who's responsible for that. Is it hospitals? Is it law enforcement? Is it advocacy agencies, right? So our interagency cooperation and collaboration, kit storage is a great place where we can look at how are we working together. Things like handing warm referrals. So many victim survivors come to us, how can we hand people off, and how can we hand victim survivors off to another service provider in a way that has a positive referral, right? So I think about when I was working as an advocate and as a SART leader, it was specifically through the SART that I learned who an appropriate handoff would be. And instead of saying, hey, here's the phone number for the police department and the precinct you need to call, I could say, oh my gosh, Mike is the sergeant down there that I know. I've had many conversations with him. Here's Mike's number. Why don't you give the precinct a call and let me know how I can help you, right? Those kinds of referrals is absolutely in the purview of our SARTs as far as our action goes. And then, of course, all of this is truly designed to improve the victim survivor experience. So, what's important for all of this is that we have intentional and informed action in our SART. And I'm coming back to my circle around service and response design. Because when we're on our road trip, I talked about pit stops, detours, and sightseeing. And when we think about our action, a lot of teams I talk to, especially if they've been working together for a couple of years or a lot of years, I listen to the service providers start to talk about doing a lot of other actions that are outside of service and response design. And so the list I'm about to give you is not all the hour to say you're doing wrong. Okay, I'm going to preface that. This list is to give you an idea of what is outside of our design of the SART's ability to influence. So some of the actions that I've heard these SARTs start to take is community education and awareness, fundraising for local charities, violence and intimate partner sexual violence to the exclusion of education work in high schools. All of these are really great to work on, and they're absolutely essential. These are often outside of the strategy of, right? If the SART is our solution, then we have to focus our work on continuously improving our focus area. Our focus area is fundamentally changing service and response design. And this comes back to our continuous improvement model. There will always be something about how we are responding to sexual violence in our community as responders that needs improvement. I see Jolene has a question for me. Audio again, bummer. Okay, can you hear me now? So I'm going to pause for just a minute and let people chat in. Does anyone have trouble with video still? See, we missed the last part. It's amazing. What's funny is I'm not even moving. Our phone is totally still. I'm just going to very briefly summarize what I was saying. It's really easy for our SARTs on our road trip to get caught in pit stops. Our ability when we are choosing to move forward on our road trip as a SART, if teaming is our selected vehicle, then we have to focus our work on continuously improving our focus. Continuous improvement process. And I gave you the model of 3, right? There is always somewhere always. And so we have to be looking for and proactively asking. When we start focusing things like fundraising or prevention efforts as a SART, we improve service and response design. So when you're thinking about mission and action, to focus on, encourage and systems processes, and interagency cooperation and collaboration. I hope that this is really tough on your end. Okay, so when you're selecting, I want to give you selecting things to do and to work on. My SART scope of work and project decision chart. This is legitimately a chart that I have by my own desk that I look at every single time I have some sort of project come up or a request or just some sort of work that I have to do, okay? So when we look at the chart, it is an investment of team resources, low, moderate, and high along one side, and then connection to our mission and areas of impact, low, moderate, and high along the bottom. So whenever your team has something come up, so for example, your team is like, oh my gosh, we have to go fundraising for this particular thing. And your stated mission and impacts are that you're going to change service design, right, and improve the response, and look at how it's impacting your investment of team resources, you can start to see where and how things might fit. So for example, if you have something that's really low connection to mission and impact, and a really high team investment of team resources, so one example that I saw from the field was that they were going to put on a very large gala fundraiser for one of their community providers. The team was going to do it. So it didn't directly impact their areas. It didn't directly meet their mission, so it was low, and it was going to absorb an enormous amount of the team's time. So when we look at this scope of work and project decision chart, we're going to see that that should fall in the not likely projects. However, something like a low investment of resources that will have a high impact on our mission is an absolute yes. You'll see right in the middle there that there's this yellow grouping called Ask Critical Questions. And you might be thinking to yourself, Joanna, what is a critical question? And I'm going to walk them through them with you now. So when we're saying a strategic yes, because that's what these are strategic yeses. We first have to ask, does this project meet our mission? We then have to ask, will it prevent us from finishing a current task? As a coordinator, I can't tell you the number of times that we were in the middle of something hard and that took a long time, and somebody somewhere was like, I just heard about this amazing new thing that will take up a bunch of our time. Let's work on that instead. And momentum gets put there. I like to call it the shiny object problem of like, ooh, shiny, right? So we have to ask, will it prevent us from finishing a current task? The next question that we want to ask is, does this project, whatever the project is that's being proposed, does it fit into the scope of our current work, right? So when we think back to our vision that we've now built for our road trip and we say, this is where we're trying to get to, we have to ask, does it fit in this? It might not. So then we can ask ourselves, does the team or the agencies that are attached to the team, do they have capacity to be doing this work? Because sometimes it might require a great number of resources. This includes resources such as staff time, the appropriate training or education, the appropriate number of funds or other resources. What about team focus? Maybe you just got done with a massive project and the team needs like a 1-month breather. Will this project result in direct changes for victims and survivors? This is a really big and very important question to ask about any project to help you stay focused on your mission and your action. If this does not result in direct changes for victim survivors and the services you as a team provide, that's going to be in one of those not likely categories. Does the project build necessary partnerships? Because sometimes you need partnerships and you got to work on a project that falls into the critical questions where it's kind of a maybe. If that's a yes, then you should consider it. Finally, can this be included in future work? If the answer is yes, and it's not an appropriate time to be doing the work, include it in the future work and vision planning. Okay, so this is a question for you to chew on more than for you to answer right now. What steps can your team take as action steps to make change in your community? This is a giant list of them. I'm not going to read all of them to you. What I want you to take away from this really massive list I've just put in front of your eyeballs is that there are so many ways to make change. This isn't even a close to complete list. But you might look at developing interagency protocols. You might look at, on the right-hand column, you see adding critical partners. Those are folks who are part of your team. It's a thing. You can use it. Partners who are in your SART, partners. You might look at doing SART services awareness raising. That might actually fit into your mission and action. You can look at your team development, doing, building that mission, building those timelines and scope of work, right? These are all ways to enact change. I want you to think about, just like when we were selecting our vehicle, I want you to select the change that's going to make an impact in your community. So, we're getting close to the road trip here. What happens when you are on a road trip? This is a chat-in question. You see all these images. What happens if you are on a road trip in real life and you see one of these things happen? What do you do? So I'm going to pause and let people answer for just 1 minute. So I'm going to ask the question one more time. So you see a bunch of pictures on your screen right now if you're following along on the web. When you see one of these many signs, what do you do when you see them on your own road trip in real life? Initially panic, then take a break to reflectively process a change in plans. Call for help, absolutely. I love that it's initially panic, story of my life. Stop and evaluate the problem. Worry, panic, get help. Your heart sinks, it can feel discouraging, absolutely. Review your mission and vision. Are we doing what we said we were going to do? Regroup, ask for directions, breathe. These are all absolutely 100% correct. So just like in a road trip on real life where you do have a check engine light, where you see a cop in your rearview mirror, when you get a flat tire, whatever it might be, I just thought bring an SVJI for help, and that makes me laugh and so happy at the same time. Thank you, Shirley. Just like in real life, when these moments happen, because in life, as in teaming, things like this are going to happen. You're going to have your engine blow up. You're going to have the road close, right? Things are going to happen in your team. You don't just lay on the side of the road and wait for death to take you. That's just like, you just don't do that. You review your mission and vision, you regroup, you ask for directions, right? You do all those things. So on the road trip of your SART, when you're thinking about crafting mission and action-driven SART, when this happens, go ahead and phone a friend. Also make sure you just keep moving. And if you're stuck on the side of the road, looking for death to you, go ahead and call SVJI for help. We're going to help you. There's also a lot of providers all here. The last thing that we need in a road trip, our destination, we have arrived. So when you're thinking about what a destination might be, I'm going to help you out a little bit on your road trip. Destination is like, this is how we know we've done our work, that there is an observable, sustainable difference that meaningfully changes the response to sexual violence. So when we're thinking about our road trip and we say, did we make it? Look back. Is there an observable and sustainable difference that meaningfully changes the response to sexual violence in your community as a result of your team's work? If so, then yeah, you made it. But here's the super fun thing about road trips. You can take a lot of them. You can take as many as you have time and resources for, or that your car is willing to go for. I know many points in my life, I could never. The important thing to know is that even when you made it, when you look back at your team's vision and you say, wow, it's been those 5 years, we did all those things we said we were going to do, then you immediately can start planning where we go next. And that's your continuous improvement process. And so as we wrap up this webinar, I want you to really think about the question, what can your SART or any of the SARTs you're supporting do to change the realities of sexual violence survivors in your community? Because that's the heart of our work. That's the reason for us being on the road together in this weird trip that we call a SART, right? Like, this is what we're doing. And so when we're crafting that mission in action, this is our question. And where are we going next together? So with that, I'm going to wrap up now. So we have about 7 minutes for any additional questions you want answered. Please feel free to drop questions into the chat or the Q&A. And I'm just going to drop silent for about 30 seconds to let people type. So 30-second pause. Okay, I just saw a question come in. So the question, since it's just a panelist, I'm going to read it out loud so everybody knows the question I'm answering. Would you be able to hit back on recommendations of what people are doing after their protocols to continue this work? That's a great question. So many of the communities that I work with, when they work through and they finish a protocol, whether for the first time or a revision, they then go, whew, okay, we're done. Yes. Protocols are never an end-all, be-all. Right? That is one example of when we have arrived at our destination, we take a little break, and then we choose new actions on how and what we can improve. So once you've completed protocols, you might do something like you might evaluate, do a monitoring phase of how well your protocol has done. You might engage in agency-wide trainings on what your protocol consists of, because many SARTs, and this is no comment on anybody in particular, this is just like a general truth, many SARTs, the folks who show up to the team, the information stays with them and maybe goes to leadership, but rarely goes to other folks who are in the work together or are colleagues in that agency. So you might want to do trainings on what those protocols consist of. You might also talk about, okay, so now that our protocols are done, there might be some other project that's come up in the meantime. So back to our critical questions, where we said, hey, this doesn't fit right now. We don't have time, resources, et cetera. This is the time to go back and say, here was our list. Let's go work on that now. The possibilities are absolutely endless. Please get a hold of us and we can talk individually with more specificity about what it is you want to do and where it is you want to go with your SART on your road trip. I'm going to pause. Any other questions? We did have a question whether the PowerPoint slides would be available. Yes, 100% slides are going to be available. I will, after we finish the recording and get out, excuse me, I have a pause now. Once we finish with the recording and we get closed captioning, we send out the recording with the captioning and any materials that were connected to it, including our PowerPoint slides. Absolutely go ahead, use these. Please just cite that they came from SVJI. So make use of these in whatever way you can. If you want the project decisions chart and critical questions, I have yet another fun little worksheet that I can send along if you want it. I build worksheets for basically everything. That's how my brain operates as a person. I know they're not for everybody, but they're definitely for me. So please, by all means, get a hold of us. So I'm going to wait any other questions. We got 4 more minutes. I'll just wait for just another minute. I saw someone else loves worksheets. Thank you so much. Yes, love them as well. Worksheet buddies. Okay, so I don't see any other questions, and I believe in valuing all of our time because you can absolutely do what? Follow up with us after this webinar. Yay! So thank you for being here today. We really appreciate it. Please use this recording as you can and wish. You can get a hold of us at svji.org. You can read my weekly SART blog, because I keep one of those, at ruralrealitiesblog.wordpress.com. I post on Wednesdays, and I write about things that I learn in the field, tips and tricks that I learned from other coordinators in doing my national technical assistance work, or other national technical assistance providers. I have everything categorized because, yes, I am that person. You can get a hold of me directly at SVJI or at jens@mincasa.org. That's my direct line. You can always email info at svji@mincasa.org. My very trusty colleague put that in the chat earlier. The long story short, please, if you need help, if you even have questions, it's literally all of our jobs, 40 hours a week, every single week, and there's like 8 of us. So, and we all have a bunch of like fun specialties. So whatever you need, however we can help you, please get a hold of us. Thank you so much again for being here today. I hope you all have a super rockin' rest of your Monday, and that wherever you are, whether it was rainy, hot, humid, sunny, beautiful, whatever, I hope it's been absolutely excellent for you. So goodbye, everyone. Thank you again.